Hi, everyone. I'm Bernardo, and welcome to Career Insights, where we help career-driven professionals advance their career the smartest way possible. If this is your first time here, feel free to, and you're interested in learning the latest tips, tutorials, and interviews from experts on how they manage their career, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell to learn about the latest content that's available. So we had a conversation with Christine a while back. And today's purpose of the conversation is to first have a very interactive dialogue with Christine and be able to understand a little bit more about Christine and her background. We're going to start off by just asking some basic questions, and we're hoping that this becomes a very interactive session with you and with us, specifically talking about body language. So let me bring in Christine so that we can welcome her today. And the other thing I was going to say is, for those of you that are joining us, if you could, in the chat section, let us know where you're joining us from. It'll be great to know where you're listening. Let me bring in Christine. Hi, Christine. How are you today?
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for the invitation, Bernardo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. So I just mentioned those that are listening to us to let us know where they're joining us. It'll be great just to understand where they're joining us from specifically this evening. So we'll give them a few minutes, but as they're kind of joining, and people are trickling in, I'd wanted to just give the opportunity for those that are just joining us to know a little bit more about you, your background, and we'll have a little discussion and then also start kind of dive into any questions that folks have.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Christine, yes, and well, I had a communication agency at the age of 27, and one day I saw a man on TV. He was talking about nonverbal communication. He was talking about, when we are crossing our arms, we are not in a closed position. And I said to myself, oh my God, I'm so often in front of my clients trying to know what the meaning is about their gestures, their behavior and everything. And that man appeared on my television and he knows it. So I said to myself, okay, first, I don't feel close when I cross my arms. So I said, okay, there is someone in the world thinking like me. So I thought that it was really interesting. So I bought his book. His name is Philippe Turchet. He's from France. And I bought his book, and the name of the discipline is Synergology. So I didn't know about this first, and I thought that it was really interesting about what he was saying. So I bought his book, and then afterward I said to myself, okay, I thought that I'll be an expert after reading this book, but no, of course not. So I wanted to have the first training. So when I came in the first training, he told me that it was 240-hour training course. So I said, oh, okay, it's not only like a 2-day training. So I took the entire training. I loved it. And at the end, when I received my diploma, I opened my firm, and it's been like 17 years that now I'm working in the field of profiling, so analytic profiling.
That's fantastic. And as I said, those that are just watching us today, if they can also let us know where they're joining us from. But I think it's great to see that, from our last discussion, and for those that are joining us, we've had a very lengthy discussion. And if you're on my YouTube channel or on Instagram, I'm actually releasing some of those videos. Yeah. But when you talk about Synergology itself, there's a whole host of different sciences when it comes to reading body language, reading nonverbal communication. And I think one of the things that we spoke about was the fact that it falls under the umbrella of like kinesics, right? Which you have the study of oculesics, which is pupil eye dilation, locomotion, which is all about hand movement. And so when it comes to Synergology and the work that you've been doing, tell us a little bit more about how does that actually connect with how it translates into the corporate world, or how does it translate into the everyday conversations when you're looking to learn a lot more about what the other person is trying to say with their body?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the corporate world, it's really fantastic. First, I have to say that Synergology is only one tool that I have. So I've been, having a lot of training in different categories, different type of trainings, but always in behavior analysis. So it was always to know better to have better information. So Paul Ekman training and everything. I worked with the group of Paul Ekman also. So all those training, but also training outside only seeing nonverbal. So it's all about linguistic, all about the intelligence of the words. So the word that the person is saying regarding the movement that they're doing, or is it connected? Also, I took training to understand the tone of voice, all the tone of voice, and the regarding the body movement also. So when we are putting that, yes, I'm working with the security. It's been like 17 years that I'm working with the Canadian Armed Force or Forces. I went to London for the Scotland Yard to give lectures and everything. Yes, but in the corporate world, it's fantastic because we can analyze one individual, one person during is the way he's communicate with his team. So we can analyze this and we can help him to have a better conversation, communication. But we can also analyze a group of people. So the team, the entire team, and with the entire team, and you know what, Bernardo, with the psychology of the team, with the nonverbal of the team, with the way they're talking together, it's all a mix of behavioral analysis, and it's so fantastic to join everything inside. So it's why, yes, I have Synergology, I have Paul Ekman, the micro expressions, I have a lot of information, a lot of training, but it's all going in the same to understand in the corporate world what is going on.
You're absolutely right. Being an industrial psychologist, for those that are not familiar with it, is the study of humans in the workplace. There is the aspect of understanding the unconscious, especially when you're talking about group dynamics, and the aspect of linguistics, NLP. And when you're talking about Dr. Paul Ekman, we're talking about the facial action coding system.
Mm-hmm.
So for our viewers who are not familiar with that, that is the study and the science around 7 universal signs of facial expressions, which kind of derived a lot around detection or lie detection, which has to do with eye movement, brow movement. And it's fascinating because one of the things that as you were talking, that comes to mind is that when we're talking about nonverbal communications or body language, it's really difficult to take one specific action in isolation to predict what exactly is the other person thinking or intending to do. And for those of us that are kind of joining us, one of the things that we cannot control is when we're trying to be deceptive, the body reacts 10 seconds or actually a few milliseconds later before you're intending to do that. And I think we talked about during that in our video. Yeah. So that's kind of where you see some tells as to what exactly someone is specifically trying to say or hide behind what specifically they're trying to share when they're communicating. And when we spoke before, sorry, I think I'm coming down with a cold here. It's I've been talking a lot all day, so I apologize for those that are watching me this evening. Usually my voice is a lot much higher pitched. Right now it's a little deeper. I think I'm getting a cold. Anyway, what I was going to say is the cluster. So in order for you to really truly start to think about what is happening with the person that you're talking to is to understand, is there a couple of data points to basically ask yourself, is there something specifically here? You can take like someone playing with their hair as a pacifier, or when you're seeing somebody going like this or like this, they're kind of covering their mouth. But that is one data point, is trying to understand what's the context of everything else. What can you share that people can learn when they're attending some of your classes?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's really interesting what you're saying about the cluster of gestures. It's really important. Of course, there is the cluster of gestures, but what like I said, it's not only nonverbal communication. It's not only gestures. You have to have several tools to analyze that. But let's go back to the gesture. To analyze really in a technical way, okay, let's say that it's technical. First of all, we have to see a gesture. The gesture, we have to understand the signification of the gesture, and it's like the alphabet. Let's say the A, the B, the C, etc. one letter doesn't mean really something. You have to add other letters to see a word, and then you have to add other words to make a paragraph, and so on. So it's the same thing with the gesture. You see one gesture, we will call that the red flag. Okay, the red flag goes up, you see a gesture. Now, you have to understand the signification. You have to know the signification, the basic signification of the gesture. But it doesn't mean anything for now. We have let's say that we scratch the right jaw, like here, okay? So micro scratches, you scratch the right jaw. This is, at the basic, it's being annoyed. Okay, of course, but we have to go on to see if it's true. So after that, we have to analyze the environment. Is there something in the environment that went on this jaw and the person is scratching because there is something here, and it's about the environment? If so, it doesn't interest us. It's not nonverbal. But if there is nothing there, we go on and we see other indicators. If the person do this, and then have an inferior sagittal axis like that, withdraw from the communication on the chair on the left side, and have a fist, and so on. Well, we're gonna know what happened right here. So and then at the end we ask a question to the person. Of course, we never say, you just did that. We never. A good analyst, a good profiler doesn't show that he saw something. It's really important. So at that point, we ask a question at the end to validate or invalidate our processing, our analyzing processing. So it's really technical. It is technical. So it's a human science. It's not like building a bridge that you have to have percentage. So when people ask me, Christine, what is the percentage of the validation? I cannot answer that, because it's not a science like, building a bridge, engineering or stuff like that. It's human science. It's with layers that we validate things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think when we're thinking about language, use of language, distancing language, it's a matter of basically baselining the individual that you're speaking to, and creating an understanding. And for those that are watching us, think of it as a heart monitor, right? So everyone has their own specific rhythm. And when you're profiling and trying to identify clusters or pieces of information to come to a conclusion if something is specifically there, is that there is a blip that happens either up or down as far as mood, whether it's energy or hands being held back.
Yeah.
These are small micro clusters that happen, and you're thinking about what exactly is happening that's creating that particular reaction. Did you say something that resulted in it? And many times it gets misinterpreted as a negative thing when it could be something completely different that the person is thinking about as a result of something that you may have triggered as a memory. And so with this information, what it allows you to do is to ask questions, and maybe ask questions later on as it relates to the conversation versus right immediately at that particular point, which is very different than when you're interrogating subjects. I know we met, I mentioned this during our video, about 8 years ago during the Institute of Analytical Training, when we became trained to trainers, and we're interviewing subjects, and actually having to question them. And it's fascinating because it's not like what you see on TV. They definitely sensationalize some of these pieces. There's a lot of other things that go behind having to ask the right questions and formulate the questions and then listen to what is actually specifically being said. And that's the other part that I was going to ask. So when we're talking about the listening skills, and we talked about this as well as part of the videos, it's what's unsaid that allows you to really figure out, okay, what actually is specifically happening here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm going to take a pause. I know we have a few viewers on, and wanted to see if there are any specific questions that you have that you may be wanting to ask as it relates to either body language at work or any of the other pieces of sciences as it relates to human behavioral analysis. I'm going to see if there's any questions. If there aren't any questions, feel free to ask as we're continuing our discussion. So Christine, tell us a little bit more about what got you interested in learning all these other pieces as well when you're talking about body language and then listening to language itself.
Yeah, well, what is interesting and interests me is the fact that body language is really interesting to understand. The visual of it, but we have to understand also what the person is thinking inside. So it's really important to analyze the body language, but to ask ourselves, where is my interlocutor? I don't know if we can say that in English, interlocutor, or my client in front of me. Okay, when I'm talking with him, so is he in front? Sorry, is he with me? Is he now at just now, Bernardo? You were in one of the 8 state of mind. You were presently in the, we call that the matrice. The matrice is that there is something outside of you that disturbing you, so you were not with me for a few seconds. But when we're talking with a client, it's important to understand that, and particularly in video conferences. So is there something in the environment, the person is always distracted or something? What's happening? And for myself, what about my own communication? So it's why I thought that it was interesting to understand the body language, the tone of voice, and how to question. When we went out of our training 8 years ago, I thought to myself, okay, I can, we can analyze, and we can ask a question, but I was not, I didn't have enough information to be a good questioner. So I had to take other trainings to have more, to know how to question, because it's a master class hard to question, to be a good questioner. So we have to understand how to do it also.
You were mentioning when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about one of your students who is a reporter who is interrogating a serial killer. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Because again, most people haven't seen
Yeah.
that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Nadia Fizzini, she's a reporter, and she wrote a book in French. It's Le Tueur. It's a serial killer. I don't know what is the name in English. Maybe My Killer. I don't know. And she did interview a lot of serial killer, especially Richard Cottingham, who is in the United States. In prison for, I think it was 5 murders at that time, but now it's 6 murders. And so my job, it was to analyze few of them and make a report on those people, and so she can write a good book on that. And there were also a documentary on that also. It was really interesting. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to applying some of these principles at work, that's something that I've done for many years. So after I focused on industrial psychology and understanding the aspect of group dynamics after taking this class, it was actually a very eye-opening experience, because it was really designed for law enforcement, not necessarily for the laymen who are working in corporate America. But you learn a lot, especially when, like I said before, language distancing, languaging, reading of tattoos, like what do the tattoos mean, and all these other pieces when it comes to the human behavior aspect of things. And I guess the question is really around when we would join your kind of workshops, your classes, what could students expect to learn that they can apply in the workforce?
Yeah, well, it's what I show in my classes. First of all, I have several kind of clients. I have lawyers, I have doctors, I have a different kind of people. When I'm with lawyers, I work a lot with lawyers, because I usually, they hire me to go in course and analyze the other parties, or the judge, or stuff like that, or to analyze a video of the client or the other party. So I was on the Quebec bar for 10 years at the e-learning Quebec bar. It's an associate with all the lawyers here in Quebec, Canada. And so I showed to them how to recognize, the movement of the judge, or how to do an interrogation with the other parties. So all the movement of unsaid, of course. But when I'm with a negotiators, of course, I'm showing him how to detect when he negotiate. You told it. Negotiation is not only money. It's your point of view. How do you negotiate your point of view with your client? Let's say. So it's really important to analyze. Is he in a stress position? Is he withdrawing from the communication? Is he doubting? So there is several gesture to see that. So it's really particular gesture. Also, my impact when I'm coming into a room. I'm a leader and I have to lead my team. I'm coming in front of my team and I have to, bring the team up to success. Is my body saying it? Am I really into it also? Or I'm not moving at all? Usually I say to people, if you have a good product, if you have a good services, tell it to your body. It's important, because if you're not moving, when we're not moving while we're talking, we call that rigidity on stress. It's because there is something happening inside of you. Maybe you're on stress. Maybe you don't know your topic well. Maybe you're trying to have an attitude of control. I know, I'm really in control, so you're not moving. There is something in your body while you're... The hands are the extension of the brain. Only your hands should move when you talk, because it's part of the communication. It's part of you. You don't put your body on a hold when you're talking. You should be into it. So how to have a good communication, it's also what I'm showing to people.
Yeah, I think that's also actually important to equate to, like, when you talk about emotional intelligence and trying to understand the other individual. Like, I've had individuals who are not, they're very controlled in their hands.
Yeah.
And so I'm moving my hands, but to build rapport, I have to realize that they're not moving their hands and I have to hold my hands down just so that I can build that rapport. And that's really focusing on mirroring, because when you're talking about building relationship with clients, or you're trying to build a relationship with someone that you may not necessarily get along with, the goal is to disarm the person. Yeah. And to disarm the person, you sometimes have to adjust your style so that you're getting to their level, so that they now feel like you're equals, and they can relax and they can loosen up, and then they can actually have an engaging conversation. The biggest challenge that people face when they're dealing with people or topics that may necessarily cause friction is that they try to go head to head, because there is this aspect of trying to get this point across, when in reality, the quickest way to get your point across is just to regress, and that person will eventually de-escalate, and then you can either change the topic or continue down the topic based on what exactly you're trying to gain from that specific conversation. But I agree with you. Yeah. So we have a few of us that are watching. Hopefully you have some questions for us. And if you don't, we're going to continue chit-chatting, because I don't get to see my friend Christine in a long time. So we're going to continue chit-chatting about profiling and reading body language. But wanted to give an opportunity for those that are watching to see if there are any specific questions that you'd like to ask Christine or I as it relates to body language at work. And that will allow me to drink some water, because I'm getting a little raspy in my voice.
Yeah. And you were talking about, doing small talk with people. Yeah, actually, we have to do small talk with people to be sure to have a good connection, to have a good rapport with this person. When you start, in let's say HR working, or even an interview, just to, with your team, you have to do this small talk before, to put, like you said, everyone on the same level. And if there is something negative that is coming, as you say, we have to listen, but we have to know how to ask a good question, because the problems with the questioning is that we put our judgment into the question. So we pass our messages inside the question. So this is really negative because the person doesn't want to hear that. They want to have a question, an open question, to understand. And there is types of question: active question, there is like a cognitive question, relationship question, emotional question, observation question, to make people move. So you have to know how to questions.
You're right, and I think these types of skill sets are extremely important. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with someone where I was trying to get a particular point across, and this individual started to, like, originally they were engaging when we were doing small talk, and then all of a sudden as I started to talk about concerns that I was raising, they're immediately looking away. They start to play with their hair, and so I had to immediately kind of just revert and say, okay, this person is clearly not interested in having this conversation. And one of the questions that I basically posed was, what were you hoping to get accomplished with this discussion? Like, what was the goal of our conversation? And that flipped it to the point of, okay, clearly you don't want to hear what I have to say. So tell me, why are we having this discussion? To allow them to tell me what do they want. And all they really wanted to understand is, like, how does the temperature of the culture look like, and so forth. So it was clear in that moment that I could have gone on completely oblivious to the other person, and then frustrated and upset when I realized, okay, there's no, and this is through video, by the way, this is not in person. So I'm looking through video. And so that is extremely important, to be able to listen and hear, and also understand movements of, and going back to that heart monitor. If the person is really engaged and they're having this conversation, and all of a sudden you're getting into a more serious discussion and they're like, then they're not, either they're preparing themselves to understand what's happening, but if they don't go back into that engagement mode, they're clearly holding themselves back to be able to really have that conversation. Then you have to figure out what exactly do you do with that discussion itself.
Yeah, and we can call that presence versus attention. Being present into the communication versus being attentive to the other one. Okay, I don't know if it's the good word in English, attentive, but being present with the other one is being into the communication in the same discussion. It doesn't qualify the discussion. I don't say if it's good or not. I just say that presence means that we are both in the same communication discussion. But being attentive to the other one is to take care of the other one while you're talking, while you are present in your communication. And some people sometimes are doing like monologue. They're talking, and they don't observe the other one to see if, is the person really interesting? So you did your job. You observed. You took care of the other one. So you were present and you were attentive. This is a good communication.
Yeah, and something that I'm going to be posting up soon is what when we talk about narcissism, right? So there are various levels of narcissism. We all have a element of it, which is, and not to the point that it's bad, but we will always want to get rewarded for something, that we do good. But when you get to the point of where it's more selfish kind of narcissism, it's all what I call the me effect, which is all about me. And one of the quickest tricks to know if your relationship, whether it's work or personal, is a me relationship is by just simply saying, tell me how things are going. If you start the conversation and they're spending the entire time only talking about themselves, and when it's now your turn for you to be able to now reciprocate, and all of a sudden they're no longer focused on you, they're looking here, they're looking there, and you can see they're not really engaged in the discussion, it's quite clear that they really didn't want to hear, from you. Now, that's okay if that's the context of the conversation, right? Sometimes you just like, let they want to vent, they want to vent. That's your decision to make. But if it becomes a habitual pattern where we talk about, again, clusters, if it happens more than 3 times, every time or every other time in that conversation, then you're now realizing that in this conversation or in this situation, this person's going to always just take. And you have to make that decision. Do you want to be involved and allow yourself to be that sounding board or not? and that's a decision that you need to be made. But what happens is most people don't have that awareness to identify that, because they wind up saying, well, you know what, they've been my friends, or they're my coworkers for a long time, or I have no one else to talk to, I feel bad for them. The question you have to ask yourself, and this was someone actually on Instagram that actually posted this, and I agree with them, sometimes you have to remove yourself of toxic situations.
Yeah.
And these types of situations can become toxic because you're not benefiting from that relationship, right? Because that's what the relationship is, between two people, regardless if it's personal or professional. And sometimes you have to work with people who are toxic, but the way to be able to do that is to strategize as to how do you go in and quickly go out versus being stuck in that particular environment.
This is really interesting. Absolutely. And sometimes we are facing someone who is not totally narcissistic. There are like conqueror. There is like strategy when we want to gain, when we want to win our point of view. Sometimes we use strategies. Of course, you know that you're, but when you're explaining narcissism, it's really interesting to see that those movements are toward them usually. So they're talking and everything goes toward them. It's always like, there is you or there is me. So you're doing like gestures like that. So I'm coming back with the conqueror. Okay, so let's say that you're not in front of a narcissistic, you are in front of a conqueror. A conqueror wants to win. So his goal is to win. So even what you're gonna say, he wants to win. So
a conqueror.
A conqueror, yeah, exactly. Yes. So let's say that you're facing a positive conqueror. So this positive conqueror will say, "Oh, Bernardo, this is fantastic what you're saying, but we should do that and this." So, and we're finishing always by doing his thing. The negative one will destroy any arguments that you have. So the way to go back into the communication is if we have to stay there, because what you said, it was fantastic. Go in and then go out. This is really perfect. But when we cannot go out really fast. What you're doing is that you're asking questions to bring back the team, to remember them that we are working in team, because they forget this. So the conqueror is really like near the narcissism.
Yeah. You're right, and I think this is why I think it's important, whether you're working in a corporation or a nonprofit, when you're working in an organization, having these levels of skill sets, whether it's emotional intelligence, body language, understanding linguistics, these are complementary skills that definitely help you and arm you with understanding how to approach a particular situation. And I know sometimes, when we talk about narcissists, it's like a completely negative and destructive thing. And it can be if you allow it to happen. I think what's important is having the awareness. And as you mentioned before, one of the best profilers will not point it out. They will take that information, they will see it, they won't show face, and they will decide what do they want to do with this bit of information. And going back to the initial part of clustering, it's okay, do I need to ask specific questions? What is the objective of this discussion? How do we wind up understanding what exactly do I need to happen as a result of the conversation? Many times people go into conversations, and this is obviously, we're talking about the workplace, so not friends where you're relaxed and it's just organic. But in the workplace, is not going into a conversation already prepared with what is the outcome that they want out of that discussion. Being able to have that at hand allows you to then come to a conclusion based on the discussion as to whether or not that outcome is going to be accomplished or not accomplished, and will it take a few more meetings to be able to make that happen? And that's what's important, because then you can drive the discussion, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. This is great.
So one of the questions that we've received is, virtual meetings are hard to assess if the audience is attentive when they are not on camera. I know this discussion is specifically to body language. Are there any thoughts on assessing the audience based on their audio? So
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts about auditory assessment? I have a few thoughts on that, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's really difficult when you are when you are giving a conference and there is like let's say 200 people. It's natural that people doesn't put their cameras. But when you are in a meeting and you don't put your camera, it's really like strange. You don't go in a room, in a meeting room, with a bag on your head because you don't want people to see you. So it's the same thing in the camera, in the video conference. So when there is no camera, it's a little bit more difficult, of course, to stay concentrate and stay up into the communication. But when it's regarding the audio, it's interesting to know to how to read the tone of voice, of course. So when the person trying to be really like, they want to say something a little bit nice, but you see that it's jerky words, so there is space between the words, that the person is annoyed. But the person's trying to be nice, but he's annoyed. They are annoyed. If the person is talking and all the words are touching each other, when we're flying to Mexico, or I don't know where, and there is like in the board they're saying welcome today to Air Transat and blah blah blah, today we're gonna fly to blah. All the voice is really like fluent. So this is a person who is really like fluent and relaxed. So the audio, it's really like difficult, but we have to understand the meaning of it. Yeah.
I'd also like to add that there are a couple of things that are important to the point that you're raising. So if you go back to that heart monitor,
Yeah.
and also it depends as to how well do you know the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding tone. One of the key points that may cause like a little hair to go up is when you hear the tonation shift.
Yeah.
So usually to the higher pitch, like yeah, no, it's okay. Like that tonation pitch, there's something clearly it's not okay. Now there have been studies that have been shown that I think this is a couple of years ago, so they may not be 13 now, but a couple of years ago, like 12 or 13-year-old girls, they were starting to speak with a higher end pitch.
Yeah, we call that up talk.
Yes, the
Absolutely.
up talk, so the
Yes,
higher pen
absolutely. Yeah.
pitch. And so that, is something else that you have to keep mindful of as to the auditory piece. The other part that I would also recommend to our audience member is to listen to the words that are specifically being said. I actually did another video on passive aggressive language, right? So the double negatives is an indicator of passive aggressive. Instead of saying, yes, I agree, saying I don't disagree or I would agree, why use the would? Meaning there's something there that they're trying to be non-committal. So listening to language, looking for double negatives is another way of understanding, is there something here to be said? The other and the last part that I would also recommend, that I always tell my clients and everyone, the power is in the person that's silent, not the person that is speaking. So if you're trying to, get the other person to speak, let silence sit. They will speak. People feel very uncomfortable with silence, but if you just quiet up in a few seconds, they'll be like, "Are you there?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm just waiting to get your thoughts."
Yeah.
And don't say anything. They're going to say something. It's a way to be able to, I don't want to say manipulate, but to push the conversation
Yeah.
along. So those, I think, would be some of the advice when it comes to auditory and listening to words. So
Yeah,
thank you for that
because
question.
and the up talk is so interesting because we know at that point that the person is not totally confident. Because if you say, Christine, did you do this work? And I say, yeah. It's because there is something there. If I say yes and I'm doing a down talk, it's like, this is it, it's done. So the up talk and the down talk is really interesting at the end of a sentence.
Yeah, it's definitely important to keep in mind, especially when you're, again, trying to assess is there really agreement or consensus as to what you're trying to drive? And even if you think about the yes, like what you just did just now, if you're saying, does everyone agree? And if you're going around and you hear the yes, if you hear that up talk, then you may want to have a follow-up conversation to say,
Absolutely.
okay, was there something there? Is there any feedback that you want to provide? The recommendation always is never to say, aha, I got you. You said something that doesn't sound right. Never, ever, ever do that. Ever do that. Because when you do that, people will tense up, be defensive. Yeah. And I've actually been sometimes like that with friends. And I'm like, oh, I hit a button, so I'm gonna backtrack, and I'm not gonna. All right, this is not a conversation we're gonna have right now. Yeah. But I do think that that is something when you're in the professional environment, you just don't do, because if you do the call outs, people will immediately get into the defensive. So again, thank you for that question. Are there any other questions that anyone else has? So Christine, in the meantime, when is your seminar? How can we hear more about it, so that people can sign up if they're interested in learning more about it? And again, I'm happy to be able to talk about other things as well. So.
This is so nice. Yeah, you just go on my website, christinegagnon.ca, and everything is there. In the services part, you have all my trainings. I have training for HR workers. I have trainings for negotiator, for security, for health people, doctors, nurses, and intervent. I don't know to say it in English. Well, people who's working with the teenagers that have problems.
Intervention.
Yes, exactly. So all those kind of of training. So it's all on my website.
I was gonna ask, could you tell us a little bit more about the HR training that you were just talking about?
Yeah. HR training, it's interesting in the fact that when I give a training on that, is that I'm covering the entire interview. So at the beginning, the kind of questions they're asking, and then into the training, what we can see. And then after the training, not the training, but the interview, what we can see with those people also when they are, going to the door and talking and stuff like that. So it's all a process of learning and watching the person in front of you. Also, those people has to, manage all the other employees. Sometimes, you have to put this one in the other section and stuff like that. So how do they feel with this? So they have to manage that also. So I'm working on that. And also crisis. Sometimes they has to, being in front of two employees that don't go along together. So they have to manage that also. So it's really interesting to do so. Sometimes they hire me to go into a big interview for a big leader and they're presenting me like someone else, but my job is to analyze the person. So it's really, I love this. I really love this. Yeah.
I'm laughing because I can't really disclose for what company, but for a company that I used to work for, that's exactly what I would go in and do internally is assess what exactly is happening. I've been known to be brought into conversations randomly for something that doesn't necessarily is assigned. I was presented as something else, but my role was not that. It was to assess what exactly is happening, especially when it comes to, I remember the first time I was on assignment was to assess a newly promoted leader into a leader of peers, and then identify the informal leader, and then basically how to help this individual lead that specific team. This is many, many decades ago, but it was a fascinating assignment because now you're kind of like the confidant, right? You're giving the idea as to who to look out for, where you're going to have some trouble areas as it relates to resistance to leadership, and what kind of strategy. So it sounds like it's a comprehensive seminar and workshop
Yeah.
from a human resources perspective that I think will be beneficial for anyone that's in the human resources space.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be sitting with those people in a big, we're talking about HR workers, but negotiation for a huge company who has a big contract to negotiate. And when I'm sitting there and doing my job, it's like it's fantastic because we are helping them a lot. We're going out for a break and we're talking about what just happened, and then we're coming back, and that there is strategies. It's really interesting, and it's like a puzzle. When you see a gesture at the beginning, only in shaking hands, oh my God, we can see so many things while we shake hands.
Yes.
And then we're coming into the room, and then so we know a little bit already about the person, and then it's like a puzzle. You saw something at the beginning, and that during the discussion, it goes like that and like that and like that. It's really interesting. It's like a story.
It is actually, you're absolutely right. And I'm smiling because it's something that I taught in one of my classes for my graduate students, which is around when you give a handshake, right? You have like the bone crusher, you have the wet fish, you have various different names,
Yeah.
but just being able to understand what you may be thinking you're saying, but actually saying, which are as a disconnect, and what and how that's going to go. If you talk to HR recruiters or even salespeople, they can quickly tell within a few seconds of the conversation, this is going to be a very good conversation,
Yeah.
or if they're going to have to pull teeth, and it's going to be very difficult for that. And that is something that is really listening and also talking to the person to be able to assess from a body language standpoint as well. So I'm going to just, before we wrap up, I wanted to see if there was any last questions that the team may have, or the folks that are my team, as I feel like I'm on WebEx or something, but I'm not. Any other questions from anyone else? Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to Christine directly, either on Instagram. And if you're following her or following me, I'm on Professor Tirado, or you can go directly to Christine's website. Please feel free to check out the videos. We talk more in depth about monorhythm and polyrhythm gestures, which is a whole nother topic that we can't get into today. And I'm sure we can talk about a lot of different things that is related to all nonverbal communications. But the thing that I want to make sure I wrap up with the folks that are listening to us is that all of these pieces, again, are data points. Not try to assume based on one specific data point that it is a fact. It should only be used as a way to determine what do you want to engage in and what you don't want to engage in. And that's pretty much it. And thinking about language, tone, visual, body language, all these other components is extremely important. Oh, and actually that's where I was going to go. For those of you that are interested about technology and body language, the one other thing I was going to say, especially if you're in human resources, I can't name the company because the last time I did that on psychologytoday.com, I have a column there called digital leaders. I got slapped on the wrist. I'm not going to say the name of the company, but you can Google it. Just look for facial action coding system and automated interviewing. I think that's the combination that you could look them up for. But anyway, this company, what they did was they took artificial intelligence and married it with the facial action coding system process. So as I mentioned before, Dr. Paul Ekman came up with the 7 universal signs of facial expressions, which is contempt, happy, sad, fear, I can't forget the surprise, and I always
happiness
and happen. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head because I don't get. That's not the point. The point is, they took these gestures, which is the gestures from here and from here, and they're different points in the face, and they've mapped it into this AI technology. And what they're doing is they're asking candidates. So if you're interviewing, by the way, and they ask you to send a video, just make sure you know who you're sending it to, because that video then is uploaded into the system. And they ask you specific questions, and what it's doing, it's according to the company, it's meant to validate the answers. But if you look at it the other way, it's also trying to determine whether or not the deception is being presented, which makes sense, because it's trying to attempt to do that. But it doesn't always lead to an accuracy. There's always a sense of false positive that comes into there. But what Christine and I actually talked about in one of the episodes that's kind of coming up is around the fact that technology will get there at some point. But as you've heard from this discussion, whether you have to listen to linguistics, you have to listen to the words that are being said, the tone, the movement. We talked about axis of the head. What is the axis of the head?
There is 27 axes of the head. Yeah, so we have 1, 2, or 3 at the same time. So we have to understand it also.
Exactly. So this technology is not there yet, but we're getting there at some point where you have artificial intelligence, and hopefully not until 20 years from now. So that will keep us in business.
Yes.
But in case it does, we'll figure something else out to be able to use with our expertise and when it comes to reading people in general. So thank you very much for joining this evening. If you haven't done so, please make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at Professor Tirado. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. I give out content very free. And if there are any specific topics that you ever want me to cover, just send me a direct message. I'm always always listening to ideas. And if you have a specific type of guest that you want me to bring on board, we can bring on board someone else as well. But thank you, Christine, for your time, your energy. I always value our interactions. I'm so looking forward to seeing you when the pandemic is over. And for those that are joined, thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great evening and have happy holidays if I don't get to see you. So take care. Have a great day.